Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in this week. Today's guest is going to be the National Motorsports Press Association's 2019 Motorsport Photographer of the Year, Jamey Price. Jamey, how are you doing today?
I'm good. That award still sounds a little weird, like it's somebody else.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know. Like, cause I never got to go to the awards banquet itself. So they just sent me like a big glass plaque and, yeah, it's weird.
Is that your first big award like that?
Yeah, probably my first big award. I've won, like various other smaller, competitions and like parts of competitions, but never like an overall winner of something. And the NMPA is not that big, but it's growing, and I've wanted to become more involved with it actually, which has been kind of cool. So yeah, there's not a lot of motorsport specific photography competitions or competitions in general that aim toward automotive stuff. So it's cool that it exists at all.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, it certainly sounds impressive to somebody who may not know any better, but yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So why don't you take a minute to kind of tell us about your journey getting into photography? I mean, I did a little background research on you. It looks like you started with horses, actually. Is that right?
Yeah, horses. So the very beginning, I was given a Nikon DSLR when I turned 21 when I was a sophomore in college. And I just fell in love with it. I loved everything about it. Both of my grandmothers were actually photographers at one point or another. One of them was basically she did weddings professionally back in the 40s and 50s and 60s. And then my other grandmother was just always a shutterbug and just loved taking pictures. We have very few pictures of her because she was always the one taking the pictures. So when I got my first camera in 2008, I just fell in love with it and fell in love with being able to tell stories, but also like show people how I see the world. And I was a college swimmer for all 4 years of college. And I just started taking my camera to all my swim meets. And at first it was like just to put up some Facebook pictures, and just have a little fun and take pictures for my friends. And then eventually I started doing like end of year slideshows that we'd do like a big thing at the end of the year with our swimming team banquet where we'd like watch my slideshow I put together. And I loved it. Like, I just loved the reaction that I could get from people by showing their story and what they were doing. And at the same time, I was also competing as a horse racing jockey. So 2005 to 2012, I was riding races. And during that time, I was kind of like picked up photography right in the middle of that, essentially. And I would take my camera out to the races with me. Nothing crazy as far as setup goes, just kind of like a 70 to 200 or maybe a 14 to 24. And I would just I would ride my race, or before my race, I would go out and shoot the races before mine and my friends that were riding. And nobody questioned the jockey that's going to go out on the racetrack. I'm literally standing there. I didn't have silks or anything on, but I had my boots and my silk pants on. And I would just take my camera out and start shooting my friends riding and various trainers that I knew, their horses. And horse racing is exactly what motorsport used to be, but I was always a motorsport fan, and I was very aware of that. Like, there's just so much color and atmosphere and the danger aspect of it. There's just great characters, and there's just a lot to do with horse racing. And I fell in love with taking pictures of horse races and that sports side, and it kind of like built to the point where I had, gotten asked to go shoot like some of the biggest horse races in the world, the Kentucky Derby, the Breeders' Cup World Championships. And that's like the Super Bowl of horse racing. Like the common guy doesn't know that exists, but it exists. And there's a hell of a lot of money in it. And it's a really big deal in the horse racing world and the equestrian world, not even horse racing, but the equestrian world. So it was a huge honor to be on the team. Like I worked with Getty at the Kentucky Derby for a couple of years. And then I did the Breeders' Cup with Getty and the Breeders' Cup with another agency. And then I eventually started working for the agency that works for the Breeders' Cup. So it was crazy to like have those inroads. But then when I moved to England after college, I was still riding racehorses, and I just brought my entire camera gear with me. Like it was a bag of clothes and mostly camera gear. And when I moved to England, I was just traveling around England and Ireland, just taking pictures of what my life was like with horses, with racehorses. And I would go to racetracks, and I became the track photographer for one of them. They just wanted some marketing content, and they paid me a couple €100 or pounds to take pictures on the day. And it was all like, under the table, because I didn't have a visa to do it like legally. So they just pay me cash, and I'd give them pictures, and I loved it. It was an amazing time.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's been like you couldn't recreate. I get asked all the time, like, how do you become a motorsport photographer? How do you become a sports photographer? And I was like, well, I don't know, but this is what I did. I don't. Nobody could do it again, and that's kind of the cool thing, that I didn't go to school for it. This is just something that I really fell into.
Okay. Yeah, it's cool to have a unique background story to that.
Yeah, it's been fun.
So kind of one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, I kind of wanted to talk about some of the images on your portfolio that I really, really love. And so we'll just jump into that.
Cool.
This one, I mean, this is just incredible. And I think it's because you never, as a spectator, get this vantage point at all when people are racing. And obviously this is a staged image, but can you talk a little bit about like how you shot this? I'm assuming you were in another vehicle.
Yep. Yeah. So every year at Daytona, before the Daytona 24-hour, we do a test session. And I can't remember if this was during the test session or race week, because I think this one might have actually been race week, which is even like a little bit more hairy, because, anytime you're running race cars outside of like official practice sessions, you're putting mileage on the engines and putting wear and tear on the cars, and stuff happens. But yeah, I was in a minivan, shooting out the back of the minivan, and Daytona allows us to do this type of photo shoot every year. And because they know it's great marketing content for the teams and the brands and the sponsors. So we're given these like crazy, unique, and really amazing opportunities to sit in the back of a minivan doing 50, 60 miles an hour around the speedway. And I think this is on a 24 millimeter lens. So they're pretty close. They're not like way back there. They're tucked up underneath of you. And it's wild. Like there's 5 cars in this. The most we've done at Daytona in a shoot like this was 8. We had 8 Lamborghini GTD cars one year. And so like the 8 cars go back like a pretty long way. And it's wild. It's so much fun. The banking, it's hard to actually show how steep it is. And I didn't even, you'd have to shoot this looser to crop it to the exact like actual angle you're sitting in. But you're like falling into the side of the minivan. You're falling all over each other. We do have harnesses on and strapped into the back of the minivan. So we're not going to go out the back of it, but it's a wild, wild ride. And you've got these loud race cars just like humming along. I think they're usually in second or third gear. So they're not quiet. And they're just like tucked up right underneath of you. And you just shoot we get usually 2 laps to do. So, once past the finish line. So an out lap, a once pass, and then an in lap. And you are shooting the entire time. I burn through at least 1 memory card, if not a memory card and a half.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Just to get that shot, right?
Yeah. And you're shooting it. I mean, I don't add motion blur to anything. So I'm shooting at a pretty slow shutter speed. This is probably like a 30th or 40th. But with this many cars, like in the photo, you kind of have to, it's a little bit more daring to go anything lower than that, because there's so many things happening. Like the minivan's moving, I'm moving. If you get 1 or 2 cars sharp, it's awesome. If you get all 5, it's very rare. So you end up shooting a lot just to make sure you've got the average number of pictures you need so that you can deliver the 1 or 5 best pictures to Lamborghini. And we happen to get it a really good time slot, like right past, like just blue hour. As you can see, sun's not out. I've done it during the day. It's just not as exciting. It doesn't add as much drama, but it's a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, I imagine it looks incredible. And so with the lighting here, is this just all the lighting that is from the stadium itself?
Yeah, it's all lighting from the stadium itself. As you can see, the car on the left is we have radios to talk to the drivers, but it's really hard to get everybody on the radio or listening to what you're saying. I tried to get him to turn his high beams off, but he didn't listen. So, you're in the back of the minivan, like doing like this, and it's just a waste of time. So you're like, all right, whatever, I'm just going to go with it. And it is what it is. And it just adds a little backlighting to the 48 car in the front. So yeah, it's fun. It's all natural lighting.
And so when you're working with these guys, do you kind of talk to them ahead of time, like match speeds and watch my hands to kind of coordinate?
These are all pro drivers. So they know the general gist of, they've done this before. So, even if we don't have a radio in the car itself, I can tell them you come forward, stay there. It ends up working out pretty well as far as communication goes. I mean, we're not going to have full complete sentences, but I can tell somebody to move down, move up, come closer, stay back. And at the end of the actual 2 laps, you generally have what we want. Okay.
Yeah. This image just immediately, when I was looking at your portfolio, I was like, oh my gosh, it's amazing. And
it's
so
fun.
I really wanted to get some background on that.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun.
So let's go. So some of the shots that I absolutely love that come out of motorsports are the pit shots.
Yeah.
There's so many different creative ways to capture pit images. I love when I see, images of the guys. I see a lot of those where the guys are running and they're kind of a little bit of motion blur. You're capturing that energy. But this is the first one that I've seen from this angle with the car coming in and the team is ready to go. I think this is just stunning. I love this.
Thanks. Yeah, it's F1 pit stops it's ballet. What they're doing. I mean, I have counted the number of guys in this before, but it's 18 or 19 people in this photo, excluding the driver. So it is, and there's people at the back of the car that I couldn't even fit in the frame. So there's more people that aren't even in this photo, but it is so cool to watch these cars do pit stop practice. And it's a second or two. I think the world record's 1.6 seconds, maybe even less than that, for 4 tires. And so you come in and everybody has a job to do. And what I'm doing here is showing how it's chaos, but it's also not chaos. Everybody knows exactly what they're doing and exactly what's going on, and they're prepared for it. So trying to show that was really my goal. And yeah, it's one of my favorite pictures too. I'd love to be able to do it again in a kind of a different way. It just happened that the light was just right on the pit lane. And, cause there's a lot of variables to that. This was during testing in 2013, I think, for Marussia. So unfortunately it's not like a world-class team. I mean, it was a Formula One team. They're gone now. But the art and the balance of doing an amazing pit stop is still something really special and cool.
And so was this your plan, was to capture it this way with the car racing in?
Yeah, I think it was handheld at a 20th of a second. And the way this was in Barcelona during testing. So the way that there's a upper viewing deck for VIPs that they use during the race weekend. And during testing, it's there's not a lot of people there, so you can just kind of walk around. And so I had my camera held out over the with the lens hoods off and everything, and the camera strap wrapped around my hand. So if I drop it, I'm going to basically kill somebody. And because they're probably 30 feet below me, maybe more. So I'm holding it out as far as I can, and I think it was a 20th of a second, if I remember, and just waiting for the car, and the car kept coming, he would do a lap and then come in, do a lap, come in, do a lap, come in. And he wasn't even going past the start finish. He was just going pit in, pit, or pit out, pit in, pit out, pit in. And so I had a couple tries to do this, and I did it at various shutter speeds. And this one just worked the best with him just flying in.
Gosh, that's awesome. And so with shots like this, that they kind of seem a little more creative than what you standardly would see after capturing, motorsports photos and media. Is this something that was requested from a client, or was this just you just had the time, you had the opportunity, and you just like to get creative when you have those opportunities?
Yeah, F1 testing is pretty open. I mean, we do have a brief generally. This particular year, I was working for this team as part of an agency delivering pictures for this team, as well as Force India, which is now Racing Point. But it wasn't something that they wanted. It was because testing starts at like 8 a.m. and goes till 5 p.m. and there's an hour lunch break. Generally, you have all damn day to do whatever you want. And sometimes it can get really boring. Like there's like one car out on track just doing lap after lap after lap. And it does make it like kind of monotonous. So you want to try and find the cool perspectives and something different just to liven it up for yourself, if nothing else.
Okay. So let's go on to the next one. Because again, like I had said, these pit images are some of my favorites. This was another one that I just loved.
I love that one too.
The sunset, and I'm assuming the only lighting on this is just those overhead lights that just kind of accents the shape of the car there.
Yep. So the Toyota team, I was working for Toyota. This was at Sebring last year during the Super Sebring weekend, and they had a session. Their night practice session was like right after sunset, so you can still see a lot of color in the sky, but it's definitely dark. And the Toyota team, they're so professional. Like everything is just buttoned up and beautiful all the time. They have great lighting on the car in the pit. And I also know the team really well. Like I know how they operate as a pit crew. So I know what the guy with the lollipop, that thing that he's holding up, I know when they're going to release the car just because I've seen it so many times. So when he flips that thing over and then lifts it up, I know that car is going. And so does everybody else that works with the team. Like when he lifts that up, the car is off like a rocket because it's electric power. So it'll rocket off the line. And as soon as he lifted that, I just hammered the shutter. And the next frame, the car was basically like 100 yards down the pit lane. But it definitely shows, what I love about, motorsport and working with this team. It's just, there's a lot of atmosphere to it.
And so is this like an actual pit stop during the race?
No, this was This was as the car was being sent out for practice, but it would look the same during the race. That's honestly one thing I love about World Endurance Championship races is that everybody over the wall or on pit lane has to be wearing a full fire suit and helmet. So it looks the same no matter what. Like if it's race, it's going to look the same as it does during practice. So this, if I told you that this was during a race, it's exactly what it would look like during a race.
And do you guys ever actually capture like pit shots during races?
Yeah. So that's another nice thing about World Endurance Championship is with IMSA, we're not allowed over the wall onto pit lane during the race. Whereas with World Endurance Championship, especially being a team photographer, we're allowed to be on pit lane with a helmet and fire suit on to work and shoot pit stops. So you can shoot it however you want. Like, the team trusts myself and the actual team photographer. I'm usually just the second assistant kind of guy. This particular weekend at Sebring, I was the only photographer working for Toyota because my friend James, who normally does all the work for Toyota, he was in Australia for the F1 race, I believe. So, they trust us to just shoot it however we want to shoot it. They don't have a lot of requests, but we could shoot during practice and race conditions. It doesn't really matter as long as we don't get in the way. And that's where it helps to know what the team is doing and when they're doing it and how they move and operate and what each signal they do means.
Yeah, I've always been kind of curious about some of those shots that I've seen where everybody's running around, and it, and knowing now a little bit of background on that it might be testing. I've thought, man, that just seems nuts that these guys run out with their cameras and start taking pictures, and knowing that there are cars like bombing around you to go into the pits as well. I kind of wondered how that worked, and if you guys actually got the opportunity to shoot that in a real race. And so it's crazy to hear that you do.
Yeah, you have to keep your head like on a swivel at all times. I mean, there's just so much happening. I love working on pit lane, especially during 24-hour races like Le Mans and Nürburgring and Spa, where we are allowed to shoot on pit lane during the race itself. And it's like better than coffee, honestly. Like if I'm feeling tired, I know it sounds like I shouldn't if I'm tired, but if I'm tired, I go on pit lane because you are awake immediately. Like it's so loud, you can't be distracted. You are immediately, your adrenaline is just like firing, and it's better than a cappuccino or an espresso or something like that. It will wake you up because you have to be so on it with your awareness and your surroundings and what's happening. And it really is a lot of fun, but there's a lot to it. And it can be very dangerous. Like people have been hit. I've been pushed out of the way by mechanics. I just didn't happen to notice like what they were doing, or the car was coming in. So, they'll grab you. Yeah.
So it's a lot of experience, like learning.
Yeah. It takes a lot of experience.
Okay. Let's go into the next one here. That was another favorite of mine. This is just too cool. I noticed, I think maybe you had mentioned in one of the videos that you did recently, the frames series that you're working on. Sometimes you get these amazing photos when it's cloudy and rainy, but at the same time, it's kind of a miserable day. The photos turn out cool, but the experience for yourself maybe isn't the best.
No, it sucks, but it definitely is awesome when you go back and look at the pictures after the fact. With rain, there's just this atmosphere that you don't get with any other, condition. And, it really brings out the lights, and there's reflections and spray, and everything just becomes so much different and better. And this was during the 24-hour of Daytona, 3 years ago maybe, and it rained for like 14 hours. It was miserably cold. My hands were frozen. There's no gloves I don't have waterproof gloves. I don't even know if they make them. But I didn't have gloves on, so my hands were freezing. It was like 50 degrees, and you're standing there, and the rain was just bucketing down. But you are determined. I'm determined to go find cool stuff to shoot. And, this was at the International Horseshoe, that first horseshoe at Daytona. So the cars are pretty close. Like I don't think this is cropped at all. Like it's full frame. They come around the corner and accelerate away. So, all the water is getting thrown off the left side of the car. And it's a lot of fun shooting in the rain, but it is not, it's fun after the fact. It's not fun doing it. It's fun to look at pictures later.
Sure. And so do you have any additional protection over your camera equipment, or is it just because it's professional weather sealed gear, you just don't have to worry about it?
No, I actually keep like a trash bag or a poncho in my belt bag at all times, just because you never know. Like with 24-hour races, especially some of these bigger tracks, like Daytona is pretty small and contained in one area, whereas Le Mans, it's like 9 miles, Nürburgring is 17 or something, and Spa is 3.5, but it runs out into the Belgian countryside. Daytona, you kind of know what you're going to get. Like if it hits one part of the track, it's going to hit the whole track. So you can kind of prepare a little bit more at Daytona, where I will actually have, think tank rain covers on my camera gear. But at Le Mans and Nürburgring and Spa and some of these other places that I've been, I always have like a backup to the backup, just in case. Like I've literally gone to a hot dog vendor before. One of my first race weekends shooting professional motorsport was actually where I am going today at Mid-Ohio. And I didn't know that it was going to rain. And it was the last like 30 minutes of the race, and the raindrops were like this big. They were huge. They were probably closer to hail balls than raindrops. And I saw it I saw this massive cloud coming at us, and I didn't have any rain gear of any kind or anything at all to protect my gear. And it was a hot summer day. So I just went to the hot dog vendor that was like at the top of this hill. And I was like, hey, do you have a trash bag? And they handed me a trash bag. I whipped my belt off and just wrapped my belt around my big long lens that I had. I think it was a 400. And I just wrapped my belt around the trash bag and pulled a little hole so that I could shoot out the back of the camera. And it worked fine. Like it's great. Like there's nothing wrong with a trash bag. I mean, it's a cheap solution. It's just not an elegant solution.
Sure. And so you kind of mentioned earlier about, rattling off like a whole memory card worth of images. How many on average on like a 24-hour event, do you have kind of an average mark that you usually hit when you leave a race? Like how many shots you've actually fired, not necessarily how many you deliver, but how many you shoot covering a 24-hour event?
24s are harder. Honestly, there's a couple factors that play into it. So one of them being how many clients I have. The more clients, the more pictures, obviously. So, that doesn't help keep the numbers low. The other thing is weather. So if the weather, like this past year at Daytona, I had a lot of clients and we had great weather. We had a great sunset and we had a great sunrise, and it was beautiful all day. And I had too many clients. Like if there's such a thing, I had too many clients. And then one of them ended up winning, or two of them ended up winning. So it just makes for even more pictures and more work. The average ends up being between 16,000 to 28,000. I did 28,000 at this year's Daytona. And it sounds like an insane number, and it is an insane number. But when you really break it down over how many hours you're actually working, and I consider that 28,000 to be like from start of Saturday morning when I start shooting whatever it is that I've been asked to shoot to the end of the day on Sunday, the last thing that I've been asked to shoot. That's my 24-hour work day. So when you boil 28,000 pictures down over, let's just call it 35 to 36 hours of work, it's not that many. Like it's less than 1,000 an hour. It's way less than 1,000 an hour. So, it's a lot, but it really depends on the weather. Like if it's gray and ugly, then I end up with less because there's just less to shoot. Like it's just, I'm not going to bust my ass to go, walk over and do a boring shot that I know I can nail in like a photo or two. Whereas when it's like sunny and nice, I'm going to do slow pans and, just do all kinds of different stuff at as many different places as I can go to that really just ratchet up those numbers. Probably like places where most people are like, oh my God, what's wrong with this guy?
And so with these briefs that you mentioned, do they typically give you like a number of images that they're expecting?
No. And that's the nice thing is my clients really know what they're going to get out of me, because they've sought me out or I've become, friends with them. So they know that like they want to hire me, not because they're going to get 1,000 boring pictures. They're going to get, 100 really nice ones that I like and that share my passion for the sport or the team. They can, use that for their marketing and social media. If you want 1,000 boring pictures, there's lots of people that do that. And it's not that they're doing any worse or better job than I am. It's just different. So my clients are really like, most of them, I mean, there's a couple that they ask for specific things. Maybe they have a new sponsor on the car and I have to get pictures of it from a certain angle and make sure that it's tack sharp. Like it's got to be razor sharp, full frame, big in the picture. And I'll have to figure out where to go to get that. But most of the time they're just saying, hey, cool, like go do your thing, have fun with it. We'll see you in a couple hours.
That's great.
Yeah, it's fun.
Very cool. Let's go here. Let's see. This one, this is just amazing to me. I love I don't even really know how to describe it. The mood of the image, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Lewis is, he's really tough to shoot. I've always struggled to get nice pictures of him. He doesn't hang around in the garage very long. He doesn't sit and talk to engineers. Like it, I don't know if it's like a team thing, but the Mercedes guys just seem to both be like that. Whereas if you go to Red Bull or even Renault, Max Verstappen and Daniel Ricciardo and, Albon and just those other drivers, they just hang around with their mechanics and they talk on the garage walls and they take their time putting their helmet on and they'll go chat with the engineers with their helmet on. Lewis comes out of the back of the garage with his helmet on, basically at a full sprint to get in the car. And because I don't know why, like, I don't know if he's just like, I don't want to give these guys time to take my picture. I just want to get in, get out and be done. But he walks out of the back of the garage where you can't see him. He's getting ready in the back, whereas Ferrari and everybody else, like, they get ready in the garage in the back of the garage, but Lewis is like in the back of the garage where you can't see him. So he'll come out and you have to be like, you can't be sitting on your phone texting or tweeting or looking at Instagram. Like, he's going to come out and you're going to have about 4 seconds to shoot what you need to shoot. And so he'll like run out of the back of the garage, jump in the car. And as soon as he's in the car, they put these big TV camera screens down in front of him and he's gone until they pull him up for him to pull out of the garage. And you don't get a lot of time.
Oh man. And so what's the source of like the glare here, the kind of glow?
I don't actually know. I think it was like one of the overhead lights. I think it was an overhead light. I don't think I know there's another picture that I have of Charles Leclerc where I literally like got really lucky and I screwed it up because half the lens was covered by a red piece of like the tape that the Ferrari team puts in front of the garage. But in this particular case, I'm pretty sure it was just the light that is kind of almost like backlighting right there.
Yeah, it's just that glow there around him is just, it's stunning. And you would never know that he's very quickly making his way to get in his car and just,
I'm pretty sure I have like one picture and this is the one picture because the rest of them are like, it's hard. I mean, you're shooting, and this is on a 500 millimeter, so it's tight. Like, there's not a lot of wiggle room or move your lens around. Like, if you move your lens around a lot, like, it's dark in the garages. The Mercedes garage is it's a dark place. The white balance in there sucks. Like, it's really difficult to make pictures in the Mercedes garage, and everything happens very quickly and you don't get a lot of chances. So, when you get a chance or an opportunity, you need to nail it.
And so speaking to that, like with the 500 millimeter lens comment, when you're shooting events like this, are you running multiple cameras so that you have something that's smaller and wider and something with a longer telephoto?
Yeah, on pit lane for F1 races, I'm usually using the 500 because I know that it's going to be useful. Like, I can shoot pictures of the driver's eyes or as Lewis gets in the car, details on the car, mechanics working on the car. The 70 to 200, I have another body that'll have a 70 to 200 or a wide lens on it. But it is difficult. Like, it's hard to make that decision of what lens should I use at this particular moment, because you could use any of them and they'd all be good. And sometimes I wish that I was more like brave about it. It's like, I'm going to use a 35 today and a 70 to 200, and I'm not even going to bring the 500 out. And then as soon as I know that I do that, like, something would happen where I'd want the 500 and I would miss it. So yeah, it's just getting comfortable and picking your lens and making sure you've got what you want, and just be comfortable with your decision, because you're not going to be able to change it very fast.
So I think that was all the favorite images that I had from looking through. One of the other things that I wanted to actually ask you about with your experience shooting motorsports is I noticed that, you got a variety of like freezing the action and then obviously maximizing the motion. And so I was curious about if you could kind of talk about when you do one over the other. Like, if you kind of have your own guideline on, this is a particular angle that works better to freeze action versus trying to get as much motion in an image as possible.
So the general rule of thumb that I use is that if you can see the manufacturer of the tire, so if you can see that it says Michelin or Pirelli or Goodyear or whatever it is, that you should be panning in some way, shape, or form. Now, obviously, there's rules are meant to be broken, but at a head-on angle or kind of a 3/4 angle, I'm generally going to be shooting like to freeze the car, and that's not to say I don't ever do like front 3/4 pans where you could pan. If the car was doing what it should be in this particular situation, you could kind of pan it. But most of the time, if it's an angle like this, I'm going to freeze the motion. If it's more like 3/4 or actual like parallel to you, then I'm going to be panning the whole time. I mean, and not even like 1/200th kind of stuff. It's going to be less than a 60th just because, that's what I want. And I'm going to yield less results out of it, but that's what I want.
And so when you're panning at those speeds and knowing how fast these guys are typically moving, do you use an image stabilized lens with that, or are you using a monopod? Is it a series of anything that'll make it simpler for you?
Most of the time I'll have a monopod with my 500 all the time because it's heavy enough that it's just not worth the backache later in the day. But anything less than my 500, I'm hand holding. And I know that Canon does have a panning stabilization mode. Nikon, or at least on the lenses that I have, does not. So when you do have image stabilization on, it creates this weird ghosting effect, and not in like a cool way. It's like a out of focus, you fucked it up way. And so I usually have the VR off at all times because it doesn't add anything to the image. Again, I have shot on Canon, but I couldn't figure out because it doesn't say like, this is the mode to use for panning. This is the mode to use for this, that, and the other. Like, they just sent me some stuff and they were like, all right, good luck. And I asked some friends and they were like, yeah, there's a panning mode. I'm like, well, I don't know what it is. And apparently it does work. But with my Nikon lenses, the VR is always off. And there's only one of my lenses that has VR anyway. So it's I leave it off all the time, unless I'm in like a dark press conference room for Formula One, then I'll turn VR on.
And so like with these longer shots where you're panning, I mean, this is just totally handheld. Is it just, it's so sharp because of your experience, like your practice doing this for so long? Is that kind of where that comes in?
This is kind of like the exception to that rule. This is a really, really hard one. And this is on 500 millimeters. So I've got it on a monopod. And this is from the grandstand, the very top of the grandstands at Daytona. And the cars are more than like 3/4 of a mile away. They're a very long way away. So and you could be up there for an hour, 2 hours, and you won't come home with very many pictures. It's very hard to see what cars or which cars, like, when my clients are going around, because you have to nail your pick. I mean, this is a great picture, but like, if I'm up there and not getting pictures of my clients, I'm wasting my time. So, I will follow, like, I'll wait until one of my clients comes around past me and I can see that it's the 11 Lamborghini Grasser Racing green, yada, yada, yada. And I will follow it all the way through the infield and then all the way around the outside. And then as soon as it goes onto the banking, I pull my lens up and I just start following it as slowly and smoothly as I can. And one of my good friends, Alex Wong, he taught me that if you put your camera in like the quiet mode that Nikon has, the shutter flap bang that it makes, like, cause it actually does at really slow shutter speeds, it does actually like shake your camera. But if you put it in quiet mode, it somehow like softens that ka-ching. And it's you can still do like it's not a burst, but it's like goes to like 2 or 3 frames a second instead of 12 or 14 or whatever it does natively. So you can still do it. It's like, and it's way less intense of a ka-ching, 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 ka-ching. So you can sit there and follow the cars and get a little bit more, but it is really hard to see who's there, but B, get it sharp, because you're exposed to the elements. It's often cold. This is at like 2 or 3 or 4 in the morning during the race. Usually was when I go up and do this, because it's just it's something to do at that time of day. And so it's cold, it's windy, it's a lot of not fun factors to be up there. And all of those things are going to affect, your sharpness of the pictures. If the wind's blowing hard, you're going to struggle to get clean, sharp images.
Sure. And so let's see here. There was another, these night actually this one's not night. This one's through trees. This is amazing to me because I've always been curious, like, are you guys setting focus beforehand, or is it because you're so stopped down that it kind of really doesn't matter?
A little bit of both. Because it is during the middle of the day. I think this is morning at Road America. So this is just from an area where any fan and spectator can go shoot if they wanted to. It's not super hard to find, but you do need to do it at the right time of day, and you do need to kind of get lucky with like how the trees have grown that year, because it does change. You'll get like a bush that wasn't there last year and it makes it better or worse. This year it was actually worse than it had been in previous years, but it's different, and not necessarily in a bad or good way. It's just different. But during the middle of the day or like bright sunshine in the morning, you're stopped down pretty hard to like F16, F18 kind of, pretty much everything is going to be in focus if I wasn't panning this. So because the car is never really going to not be in this like 12 to 15 foot deep like space, they're never going to be like anywhere other than that. So you can manual focus on this spot. And because you're shooting through so many trees and bushes and leaves and all that I do manual focus this spot. I'll aim the camera at the track and manual focus to the track, and then just start panning cars as they go through that. And you pretty quickly figure out, just looking at the back of your camera, what, where in your pan is the nice, like there is a nice spot, like, before or after this, the car might be completely covered up by leaves. And then it's just like the tail of the car or the hood of the car. And that's not what I want. I want the car. So as you're panning, you'll kind of figure out pretty quickly like what works and what doesn't as far as where the car needs to be. And a lot of that is luck, because as you're panning it, you're just firing a sequence of frames, and one sequence might be different than the other just based on how fast the car is moving. All those factors play into it.
Sure. And so are you polarizing too when you shoot cars during the day?
Sometimes, not all the time. It really depends on what if I want to go below a 30th or a 30th of a second, you're going to really need to be polarized or have an ND on it just to knock a stop or two off the light. But I don't necessarily do it just because of windshield glare or stuff like that. It doesn't really bother me. And sometimes my clients actually don't want to see who's in the car, because if you can see who's in the car, then it's a picture of that person. It's a picture of Pat Long, not Ryan Hardwick. And if you can see the car and not the driver, then it doesn't matter who's in it. They can use it for anything. And it can be used if my client is in the car, but the teammates sitting out, they can still use that picture, and nobody really needs to know who's in the car for that stint. Sure. Yeah. It makes it a bit more evergreen. Yeah. They can use it for longer. They can use it next year if the car doesn't change. There's various reasons why I do and don't. Okay. Well, this is another one that kind of stuck out to me. I love some of these total silhouette, just a few highlights from the sun. I thought this was a super cool shot that, again, it's that kind of frozen, and that was because of the angle. Is that right? Why you chose there's no point in putting a slow shutter speed on this. I wouldn't even, it looks like a Lamborghini, Porsche and something else back there, but it doesn't even really matter who it is. It's all about the light and the backlight of the sun just reflecting off the track this was morning warm up before the 6 hour at Watkins Glen a couple years ago. And it's all the way down at the bottom of the boot. So, it's not an area this only works because it's really backlit. And, at another time of day, this is a really boring photo. There's nothing nice about, it's a okay place to go shoot, but it's not special. And the only reason it's special here is because the sun's still pretty low in the sky. The higher it gets, the more boring it gets in this particular spot.
And so a lot of this just comes from also then your experience in shooting at these different areas and kind of knowing where to go, when to be there because of the lighting and that.
Yeah, it's experience. But it's also like kind of sometimes luck too. I mean, you can kind of be wandering around and see something, like, especially during a 24-hour race. Like, I'll watch old replays, I'll play video games. I mean, the video games these days, like, are super realistic on where the sun rises and falls. And I've used project cars to scout tracks, like, where you can see, like, you can set the time of day to be, 6 p.m. at Le Mans, and you can do a lap of Le Mans. And as soon as you're facing straight into the sun, it's going to be awesome standing trackside. And it is genuinely like, that's exactly how it's going to be if I get that kind of lighting condition during the race. So, there's so many different things available to us these days that, 20, 30, 40 years ago, these guys didn't have it. Like, you'd figure out, like, you'd do a lap of the track in your car the week before, or, you just get lucky, or you talk to people that have been there many times. And a lot of it's just like, hey, I'll talk to one of my friends, like, hey, where are you going this morning? And we'll all go out to, a corner, and we'll all shoot it different ways. And we all come home with something that's not the same, which is really what's cool about photography and motorsport photography. Is 20 people could go out to the same corner with the same cameras and same lenses, and we'd all have 20 different pictures.
Sure. Yeah. And that's a good point too about like the video games and that. I see a lot of photography anymore. Well, not necessarily photography. I guess there's photo modes in there, but you see a lot of stuff pop up online. And because Photoshop has come so far and retouching, sometimes it's almost difficult to tell what is just actually a render from a game versus what's actually just a really, really nice retouched photograph from an event.
A buddy of mine did he worked for Gran Turismo this past year, and they asked him to recreate with the same car. So they would like shoot this car like sitting in this spot in London, and then they would like tell him, we're going to go shoot this car, this spot in London. And it is, I honestly, like, to this minute, if you pull up that post that he made on Instagram, I cannot tell which is real and which is not. It's insane.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So I hope that it doesn't like put me out of a job one day. But we'll see.
All right. So I had some other questions here that I had kind of sent you ahead of time just to get kind of, and you don't have to elaborate too much. It can just kind of be a hot take type thing. But I just figured we'll hit you with these. We'll see what you have to say.
Okay. So
you've already talked about capturing motion. Can you tell me what it's like to capture like a 24-hour race event?
I love it. It's kind of like asking somebody, like, are you excited to climb Mount Everest? Like, the answer is yes, but there's also like this certain amount of like dread that is going to come with it too. I love it. I love 24-hour races. There's nothing like it in the world. In the photography world, I don't know what to compare it to. It's the closest thing to going to war I can imagine. It's exhausting. It's it beats up on you. You feel drunk at the end of it. But it's extremely rewarding too, because there's not that many people out there that get the opportunity to do that and get paid to do it. But it has that element of fun too, and adventure, where especially at like bigger tracks, like Daytona is different. It's all pretty contained. There's lots to go and do. But when you go to Nürburgring or Spa or Le Mans, or I've never been to Dubai, but like you go to some of these tracks that have a little more as far as corners offer, like it's an adventure to go out there at 3 a.m. to the Mulsanne or Arnage and places that are iconic but also exceptionally dangerous at 3 a.m. and it's an adventure. I mean, from start to finish. But when you get to the end of the day, you're pretty beat up. You're often irritable and grumpy, but it's an amazing thing. And I love 24-hour races. I'm really, really sad that this year's only given me one to cover. It's a lot of work, but I love it.
And so with your experience doing those, like what's a must have when you go cover one of those events?
I honestly, I don't drink coffee. I've recently learned that caffeine is not good for you during one of these events. Like it really creates a rise and fall, like as far as your energy levels go. So the last two races, two 24-hour races I've done, I didn't do any caffeine, and I felt much better at the end of it than I did when I have had caffeine of some kind, whether it be a Red Bull or something like that. So not doing caffeine is actually like my secret tip. But having some comfort food just to kind of keep you motivated and still loving life a little bit. It's just kind of having something to like look forward to when you get back to the media center, whether it be, a Gatorade or a donut or something like that, just to kind of make you like, I don't know, we bring Oreos and Capri Suns. It's the shopping trip before a 24-hour race is interesting. not nutritionist approved generally.
It's like a road trip. You stop at a gas station. It's like, I've got to get some of those little donuts because it's a road trip. It's the only time I eat them. So.
You got jerky, and I do pistachios and banana for breakfast kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah. So, talking about that, like, do you guys get breaks then? Do you just kind of know when to take your breaks throughout that? Because surely you're not actually like moving around the track the entire time through a 24-hour race.
Generally, I'm moving around the entire time.
Really?
There's been like maybe I've done, I think 10 or 11 or 12 24-hour races. And I think in those, let's call it 10 races, I've not been awake for maybe like 2 of them. Like I've taken a nap for 2 of them. So at Le Mans, there's Michelin sponsors a little cafe where you can go, and if you really wanted, you could have a beer. That's for the journalists that aren't doing a lot of work. But the photographers, like there was actually a couple of years ago when Toyota broke down in the middle of the night in 2017. Both the cars broke down, and the third one was like sitting 5th or 6th or something, and eventually climbed its way back to 3rd. And when the 2 cars broke down at like 1 or 2 a.m., the team photographer and I went and had a beer in the Michelin cafe, and we're like, this fucking sucks. So like generally we don't get a break. I don't take a break. You might sit down and just have a minute to yourself, but if you take a break, you're going to fall asleep. So unless I know that I really need a nap and I'm not going to miss anything, and it's not sunrise or sunset, I might take like a 15 or 20 minute cat nap, but it's like oftentimes it's when I'm waiting for my cards to ingest. Like I'll stick my card in, it's got 60 gigs to ingest, and it'll take 10 minutes to do it. I'll be like, all right, I'm just going to put my head down for a minute, and my computer will like bing at me and wake me up when it's done. And that's my rest. And then you start editing. And as soon as you start falling asleep editing, you're like, all right, I've got what I needed to get. I'm going to send it to my clients, and I'm going to go back out, because if I don't, I'm going to fall asleep.
And what's the turnaround on that? I mean, they expect that stuff pretty quickly, don't they?
Yeah, I'm delivering multiple times during the race. Like for Toyota at Le Mans, we're delivering probably 8 to 10 times during the race. So, you can't we're not putting like rainbows and unicorns in our pictures with Photoshop. There's not a lot of fluff that goes into them. It's quick color, quick contrast, make it crop nice, and send it. And that's all you need.
Okay. Good to know. All right. So what's the hardest job that you've worked?
I'd say Pikes Peak would probably be right up there. The hill climb is just brutal, and I live in a state that's not like very high elevation. So when I've done it in the past, you go out there, it's like usually practice starts on Tuesday, I guess. So you arrive Monday, you try and like sleep and your alarm, call is probably like one in the morning generally. So you got to you have your stuff ready to go the night before, get in your car and you drive straight up the mountain, and it's all the way to like 14,000, whatever, how many feet it is. And you are seriously altitude sick and dehydrated, and it's cold, it's windy, you're tired. And your day is like over. You've already worked like an 8-hour day by 9 or 10 a.m. It's really, really, really hard. And you're standing on the side of the mountain in like full winter gear. And at the bottom of the mountain, it could be 70 or 80 degrees and beautiful. And you're wearing hiking boots. There's all kinds of stuff to be aware of, like not just race cars, but animals too. Like it's a lot to take in, but the 24-hour races like Le Mans and Nürburgring are just hard in a different way. Not as like physically hard. It's not like I'm going to get altitude sick at the Nürburgring. But just being awake for that long and the pressure that I put on myself creatively to keep making pictures for my clients that are something that I'm proud of. And I don't want to just phone it in and just take a picture just to take a picture. That's where it's just hard mentally to keep going, keep pushing, keep making pictures that matter and that you're proud of, because it's not easy.
Sure. Okay. Now, if you could only have one camera body and one lens when you're shooting an event, what is the setup that you would go with?
It really depends on the track, but if I had to say one camera, one lens, I'd probably do the full frame camera D5 that I have and the 500 millimeter. I just feel like you're not going to get anything wide out of it, but you can do a lot with it. I feel like I'd get more use out of it than I would like a 35. But if I wanted to go somewhere, like that's what I often tell people that want to do what I do is like, take what you got. If it's a 35 or an 85 or a 50, take that and just walk around with it and just make pretty pictures and tell stories and do something kind of cool. But if I had to choose what I was going to shoot, it'd probably be a 500 or maybe my Sigma 135 that I've got. I love that lens too.
Okay. All right. And what is one thing or area in photography that you've done that you would be fine never, ever having to do again?
Product photography. I hate product photography. I've actually done a fair amount of it, especially during these last couple months when there hasn't been as much racing going on. Like March to June, July, I was doing a fair amount of photography, just white background. Here's your product. Shoot it at f10 on a tripod and make sure the light's nice and be done. It is not fun. I don't enjoy it. I don't enjoy the selecting of the images and the editing of the images. It's very monotonous to me. I know that there's decent money in it because I've been paid decent money for it, but that's not what I want to do for a living. So if I never got asked to do product photography again, I'd be okay with it. But I know I'm doing product photography on Tuesday and then again on Wednesday. So yeah, I know that wish is not going to happen.
Do you ever get to do any fun automotive product photography?
No. I mean, when I get to do stuff with Lamborghini, we don't have a lot of time. The cars have stickers all over them for an event that we're doing. I don't get to do a lot of like, here's a car, go have fun. It's happened a couple times, but it's very rare for me. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people that are better at it. I know that my skill set's probably just in here's a race car on a racetrack going around for 24 hours, capture it as best you can. I think that's what my skill set has probably become known for. And I'm okay with that as long as that keeps paying the bills. But I very much enjoy being given a car and go have fun with it. It just doesn't come around very often for me.
Sure. And so with post-processing, what are the programs that you typically use for your post-processing workflow?
When I take a picture, it goes onto the Lexar memory card. And then once I pop the Lexar card into the card reader, it goes into a folder, which then I'll drop it into a program called Photo Mechanic. Photo Mechanic I learned about when I was working at a newspaper back in 2009, I guess. And it just makes things much easier to sort and look through high volumes of pictures really quickly, because it's just rendering a JPEG version of the file. Even if you shoot RAW only, which is what I'm normally shooting, it still pulls up like a JPEG version of the RAW that your camera embeds in the RAW file. So it's just flipping through pictures really quickly, and I can look through them really, really fast and just make sure it's sharp. Color selecting, make sure that, I've got like my clients listed out in front of me, so I know who I need to select pictures of. And then I'll move those selected pictures into Adobe Lightroom. I don't have Photoshop or anything. I've watched friends try and edit volumes of pictures on Photoshop, and it's a sad thing to see. Because like if you open like 20 pictures in Photoshop, it pulls up like 20 different windows, and you're like, well, this is stupid. I don't know like what you're doing here. But so he'll edit each one and then close the window, and edit each one and close the window. And during like with Lightroom, I'm just like do the same thing, but just hit next, and I don't have to close anything. So Lightroom does more than enough editing power that I need it for. I'm not adding rainbows and unicorns to the pictures. If I have to clone a dust bunny out, sensor dust, I can do it. But beyond that, I'm not giving much time to these pictures. I want to make it as clean and as perfect as possible as I can in the camera, so that I don't have to screw around with Photoshop or heavy editing for it, because my clients need these pictures back pretty quickly.
Sure. All right. And so the last one I have is Formula One or endurance racing.
Endurance racing.
And why?
Yeah. I love F1. It's great. It's a great resume. Like I've shot F1, check the box. But it's very frustrating. It's really frustrating. Like I was talking about Lewis, the drivers make you work for really average pictures of them. Like, you don't get to see them very much. The tracks are massive, like with exception of Monaco and Singapore and some of the other street circuits that are like Hungaroringen, like kind of smaller and a little bit, closer proximity to you in the cars. But with few exceptions like that, like the tracks are big places. There's a lot of catch fences. You can't really shoot through the catch fences very well. So you end up with very limited options as far as what you can do photography wise. Like, there's only so much I can do to capture a picture of Lewis if he's literally running from the hospitality unit, jumping on a scooter, going 20 miles an hour to the back of the garage, and then disappears. And to get a nice picture of him is very, very, very difficult. Whereas with endurance racing, you get a full cycle of the sun. Sometimes, my next one is a 10-hour race, and then we've got a 12-hour race in November. And then hopefully next year we'll be back to normal, where we've got 24-hour races. And, that's a photographer's dream. That's what we're all out there to do, is to take pictures at nice times of day. And a 24-hour race or endurance racing gives you those options as the sun goes around and we get the different sun cycles. So, the drivers are more accommodating. They don't sprint from one place to the other. You can stop and they have a conversation with each other, and the pit lane is more open. And yeah, it's just easier to make pictures at endurance races than it is at F1 races. And when you nail an F1 picture, it's very gratifying. I won't lie. Like, you've worked your ass off for that picture. Whereas in endurance racing, they kind of fall into your lap. You're like, oh, this is nice, but I'm going to get another one that's even nicer in an hour because the sun's going to set. So, with F1, you take it as it comes, but endurance racing, like you want to really work for it, because the pictures are going to be amazing. The color is going to be amazing. The racing is great. And that's something that I tell people too, is like, again, I love F1. I grew up as an F1 fan, But if I had to throw $1,000 right now on who's going to win the race this weekend, I wouldn't have a problem doing that as far as like F1 goes. If you asked me to put $1,000 on who's going to win the IMSA race this weekend, I wouldn't do it because I don't know who's going to win. It could be anybody. And that to me has value as well as a photographer, because instead of going out and it's just another Lewis Hamilton win or another Michael Schumacher win when he was dominating, there's some variety to what we're actually capturing. And it's not like the same thing week in and week out and week in and week out. You can really fall in love with a championship because of the players in it and the different teams and the sounds of the cars and the looks of the cars. And, it's a lot of fun to shoot endurance racing. And I think endurance racing is actually, it's great right now, but it's about to be even better with the new regulations and things that they're bringing in. I really hope that we're basically about to enter into a golden age of car racing and sports car racing, that we'll have lots of manufacturers, lots of really big name drivers driving in it because they want to be involved. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Cool. Awesome.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. And it's a great answer. I mean, I hadn't really thought about the value in having those sun cycles, and you're right. Like getting the best times of day throughout the race. That would be a fantastic asset. So
I mean, it's what we're all out here, like as photographers, that's what we all want, is to have nice pictures at nice times of day, and endurance racing offers you that. I have a friend of mine that calls F1 the high noon racing series, because it is like, they race at like, the race starts at 1 p.m. and goes to 3 p.m. And that's like the worst time of day for light. There's a few races on the calendar that do something different than that. They do like the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix is at like a sunset time of day, or qualifying is sunset. You do get a few of those, but in general, it's like 1 to 3 p.m. Those are your race start times. And, in a couple of weeks, I'll be shooting the 10-hour Petit Le Mans. It starts at 10 a.m., I think, and goes till 10 p.m. So, as the day progresses, it gets better and better and better and better and better and better and better. And then it's nighttime, and you can do some different stuff with that.
Sure. Cool. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview. It was really cool to get to know you better and to hear more about the process, the work that you put into this. And I know, like I said, I know you're busy, so I really appreciate you giving me some time.
I appreciate you reaching out, and it's a lot of fun. And I love sharing not just my story, but like more of the process behind some of this stuff, because that's really what the whole like frames episodes and documentaries are really, I want people to understand when they see a picture on Instagram or Twitter or whatever, wherever they see it in a press release or magazine, that a shitload of work went into making that picture. And it's not just like some guy stumbled out trackside and pushed a button on a camera. Like there's work. And so I like sharing with people that don't know or don't necessarily have the privilege and advantages that I have of being trackside at all these different races, to show how hard it is, but also how rewarding it is and how much fun it is. And that, I was just a fan once. I wasn't born into a racing family. I just love car racing, and, that anybody can do this if you work hard for it and want to do it.
And so where can people see your work? Like, where do you most regularly update? Is it your website, Instagram, Facebook?
Probably Instagram. Social media has become the new portfolio. So you can follow me at Jamey Price Photo on all social media platforms. I've tried to keep the brand pretty consistent and clean throughout. But I do update. I've done a couple blogs this year on my website. So yeah, I try and use as many different social media platforms as I can to, put my name out there, but also show how cool my job is.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's the URL for your website?
JameyPricePhoto.com.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, very cool. Well, thank you to everybody who tuned in to check this out. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this. Hope you enjoyed the interview this evening with Jamey, and, check back later on. We'll have another one coming up soon. Thanks so much. Have a great night. We'll see you later.